right. Happy Sabbath. Good to be back with you. Uh, Sad to be apart from the brethren, but still glad to have you here online. Miss seeing you all face to face, those who are with us. And those who were with us, we miss you even more that we didn't get to see you this year. God willing, we'll get to see you at some point in the future. Um, Hey, guess what? This is kind of be like what just happened the other day. Remember I said I had a lot to say? Well, I guess what I have a lot to say. But this time, no one's got anywhere to go. So I got you for 3 hours. No. Um, this is, we're going to delve back into the calendar series that I started. This is actually part 6 in the series. Today we're hitting the Sabbath in Scripture and in history. What we've done so far, just a quick review. Part number 1, we went through what's wrong with the Jewish calendar, why we don't use it. Part number 2, we did by whose authority. Do we need the Sanhedrin? Do we need the Levites? Who do we need to tell us how the calendar operates? And the answer is God tells us by his holy word. The scriptures are our authority to establish those things. Part 3, we looked at coming to terms with biblical timekeeping. And we did that in part 3 and part 4. Looked over various terminology, finding like what Erev means, what opsios or opse in the Greek, or these various terms that we think when you're reading in your King James at even or evening, we're thinking that it means sunset, and we saw several cases where it doesn't always mean that. And so we got to be careful, context, when studying anything out, that we don't trip ourselves up. And then in part 5, we looked at the biblical day. What are its boundaries? Where does it start? Where does it end? And we also established the fact that biblical day, much like those evening words, day has 3 different meanings in the scripture. A day could be the daylight portion from sunrise to sunset, or it could be the 24-hour day, meaning from sunset to sunset, or it could be referencing an age, such as Abraham rejoiced to see my day. And so we got all that established. So part 5, I just said we established that day is a sunset to sunset day. So I'm not going to focus a whole lot on there. It's going to be somewhat in here right now. But here, for those who've been around for a while, you remember Sabbath Man. Sabbath Man was our website mascot for a while. And so we have our Sabbath suspect lineup, because there's the true Sabbath of Scripture, and then there's many out there who claim to be Sabbath. You got as we're going to establish here in this message, the true Sabbath is Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. You got those who claim it's a Sunday Sabbath. There's a lunar Sabbath, which I'm really actually going to address a lot more in this message, because I somewhat addressed the sunrise Sabbath in part 5 when I was showing what a biblical day is. I'm not going to spend much time on Sunday Sabbath at all, because I think most are aware of that. You have questions on that, please let me know. Lunar Sabbath is the idea that the Sabbath is not Saturday, it's not Sunday, though it could be depending on the month or depending on the year and how it's going, because the argument is that each new moon resets the week. So you have new moon day, day 1, and then day 2 of each month. And I don't mean like January, February, I mean like months, like based on the lunar cycle. That day 2 of the moon is the first work day. Then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are the 6 work days. So it'll get you day 8 is the Sabbath, day 15, day 22, and day 29 are the proclaimed Sabbaths of this. I will probably at some point in the future do a pure message refuting this concept. I am going to definitely knock it out of the park today, but I will be going more in depth into it in the past than I have done in the past. I first heard of that doctrine back 1999, 2000. It was actually like a new doctrine just started in 1998 by a guy named Jonathan David Brown. He's a music producer. known in Christian circles. He produced like Twyla Paris, for instance, we have like her song "We Bow Down" in our hymnal. He's a music producer, but he also turns out he's a member of the Klan, and he hates the Jews. And he was involved with helping someone who tried to blow up a synagogue. And so he went to serve time in federal prison. And while doing so, he came up with a theory of lunar Sabbath, because of course you can't trust the Jews, because who are they? So lunar Sabbatarians, that's your dad. Your dad's a Klansman. All right. So that's where it's at. And I can, like I said, I'll delve into that when I go into the appear message on that. Today I want to focus on the Sabbath itself, that people need to know the true so they can identify the counterfeit. All right, so when someone comes to start working at a bank and they're learning to be a bank teller, they're coming in, they're trained to recognize true Federal Reserve notes, what we call money here in America. And they're trained to know this is what Federal Reserve notes look like. There's a security thread, there's this watermark, there's this fine line printing patterns, there's this visible security thread over here, here's color shifting ink over here, here's this, and they come to know the different editions of the money. They don't spend their time studying other counterfeits. They come to know the true. Here's how you identify. Here's look at these points here, and this point here, and this point here. And it's the same thing we do with Scripture. This is what we should do with Scripture. You got this point here, this point here, this point here, this point here. If something's missing one of these points, it's not real. Because there's lots of good counterfeits out there. Some things look really close. This is the true and a counterfeit. It's a close-up of actual true and counterfeit bills. See, the counterfeit is a little fuzzy. Totally. So I want to go through and I want us to know the truth, because there's always new counterfeits coming all the time. The lunar Sabbath came out in 1998 from a book called Keeping Yahweh's Appointments, Jonathan David Brown. And that's already spread like wildfire through many different congregations, many different flavors. SDA church is hit by it really bad, amongst many others who are getting sucked into this concept. And it's a new idea. Actually, it's a new practice. Let me bring that back, because it was an idea presented in the 1800s by their scholars, mainly out of the Germanic schools, who were those who don't believe the Scriptures, and they did the documentary hypothesis saying Moses didn't write the Torah and all these things. And they come with this theory that God didn't give the Sabbath to Israel, that they learned it from Babylon. Babylon did it from their astronomy, and Babylon was in a lunar Sabbath. Therefore, Israel kept the lunar Sabbath, and so on and so forth. And the Jews will say this in their own encyclopedias. I have an encyclopedia set right in my, a few of them actually, right in my front room there. And one of the articles that they love to quote is one that says the Sabbath and new moon were originally based on the moon. The Sabbath no longer is, but the new moon is. That's what, so they say, look, the Jews admit it. And they try to build a case out of that. And people, I've warned you before, I'll warn you again, be very, very, very careful. If anything you're reading that's an encyclopedia, that's any scholarly work, just because it comes from a scholar doesn't mean it's true. Prove all things. Check the bibliography, see what they're citing. That article, for example, where they cite that, they only use materials nothing older than the 1800s. So they're thousands of years removed from the people who did these things. So in other words, I think, I feel, I really wish, I wanted to be this way. That's what it is. It's not reality. So we're going to see as I present this, I'm going to tell you beforehand, before we get there, what's happening. The true characteristics of the Sabbath day are this. It's a specific day, being the seventh day. It's 24 hours long from sunset to sunset. The Sabbath is given as part of the Decalogue. That's the 10 Commandments. And it stands apart from the annual appointed times. It is not date specific. It is day specific, but it is not date specific. It's specifically the seventh day. It ain't pick and choose. Here's 7, pick a card, any card. It's the seventh day. But it is not date specific. The Sabbath occurs after 6 contiguous days. Being contiguous means back to back without interruption. itself being the seventh day, and it's followed by the first day of the week. The day kept holy by Jesus Christ is the true Sabbath. And so I will go into first century records to show what day was being kept as the Sabbath in the first century, and there is no record of dispute over what the Sabbath is within our New Testament or within records. They know when the Sabbath was, and Jesus kept the same day as the rest of Jewry, the rest of Israel. Also, the true seventh-day Sabbath was kept by the Jews, wherever they were scattered in the diaspora. And when they were found, even after not talking for centuries, they were found keeping the same day that we know today as Sabbath. So, the Sabbath is a specific day. Okay, Exodus 16, verse 23, he says, "This is that which the Eternal has said, tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake what you will bake today, and see that what you will seize, and that which remains overlay up for you to be kept until the morning." So here they are. This is them in the wilderness. They are 1 month out from being slaves in Egypt, and he brings them in, and he's starting to give them manna from heaven. And he says, "I'll rain down bread from heaven for 6 days. On each day, you're going to gather an omer pan. Don't grab more, whatever. It's all going to go. And then on the 6th day, gather double and prepare it that day." That's what it says back in verse 5. But verse 23, bake what you're going to bake, what you're going to buy, whoever you're going to do. If you can make manna donuts, make manna cake, make manna bread, make manna rolls, whatever you're doing with the manna, do it, and do it today. Because tomorrow, that's what you're going to eat. There's going to be no manna in the field for you. So manna was marked, or manna marked the Sabbath. There was a sign in heaven that marked the Sabbath, but it wasn't the moon. It was the manna. Manna, 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 double manna, no manna. Manna, 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 double manna, no manna. And it marked the Sabbath for 40 years in the wilderness. It wasn't pick and choose. Hey, we want a different, we're the tribe of Simeon, we want a different one. Okay, you can have yours, and we'll rotate, No, it was the seventh day, and that's when the manna stopped for all the tribes. Likewise, Numbers 15, verse 32 and 35, while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man that gathered sticks upon the Sabbath day. And the Lord said to Moses, "That man shall surely be put to death. All congregations shall stone him with stones within the camp." He didn't have a choice to choose for himself. No, this is the one I chose. One out of 7, I chose this one. No, it's the Sabbath day. You don't get to choose. It's the seventh day. So, again, this was taught for 40 years in the wilderness by a sign out of heaven. That sign, though, was manna, not moon. All right? It's 24 hours long from sunset to sunset. As I said, we dealt with this a lot in the last part 5. But we'll see here Genesis 1, 1 to 5. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void. Darkness was upon the face of the deep. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw the light, it was good. God divided the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And remember, we learned this was the summary of what this happened. The evening and the morning were the first day. In each one of these days of the 6 days coming through creation, it ends with a conjunctive phrase, and the evening and the morning were the first day, and the evening and the morning were the second day. Just like we saw in all the days we saw in Genesis 5, that it was a descriptive of the whole portion beforehand. When he was born, when he fathered, when he died, and all the days were. Likewise, this evening and the morning are descriptive of verses 1 through 4. It's describing that time period. The evening and the morning were the first day. This is one of the places we establish that a day is both daylight and 24 hours, starting from evening to evening. John chapter 19, verse 38 to 42. We looked at this in the parallel accounts. I'm not going to include them all in here today, but also it's in Luke, and it's also in Mark, and it's also in Matthew. After this, Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, he besought Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him leave. He came therefore and took the body of Jesus, and there also came Nicodemus, who at the first came to Jesus by night and brought let's make it night, and he brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds weight. And they took the body of Jesus, and they wound it in linen clothes with spices, as the manner of the Jews is to bury. In the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and there was a new sepulchre which no one had ever been laid in, and there they laid him because the Jews' preparation day for the sepulchre was near at hand. So the implication here is it's preparation day right now. We can't go too far because the preparation day is going to end. We need to get him in there before the preparation day ends, and therefore the Sabbath begins because they had to bury him that day. And we know that he died at the 9th hour, 3 p.m. And so this gives them a little bit of time to get him down, get him prepared, and then get him entombed. And so they did that all. Luke also says it was the preparation of the Sabbath was coming on. Mark says it was the preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath, and these things occurred, and that the women beheld what they did with his body, and then they went and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. We also saw from John 20, verse 1, that the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came there early while it was yet dark. And so we see it was the first day of the week while it was dark, meaning the first day of the week didn't begin at sunrise, it began while it was yet dark. So also evidence that a day is from sunset to sunset. We also discussed how the Feast of Unleavened Bread is not like Jewish Ramadan, how it is 7 days that you eat unleavened bread, and that there's no leaven to be found. It's from the 14th day at sunset until the 21st day at sunset. Ba'erev is at even. It's the King James there. Hebrew is Ba'erev. And so from the 14th day of the month, Ba'erev, you eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month, Ba'erev, and that's 7 days. And we also talked about then the discussion, or we've shown back in part 3, that inclusive count is the only way time and things are counted in the scripture. And so what I mean by that is we in America here, and most, actually, I think a lot of people today, we have an exclusive count. We have a zero factor. Like today's Saturday. So if I say 3 days from now, most people say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. But scripturally speaking, it would be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Sabbath to second day of the week. And so when 7 days are talked about, it's inclusive. Then that means the 14th can't be a separate day. This is the 14th at even is talking about the 15th. The 14th doesn't include because it's 7 days: 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. It's not 8 days. And so for those who argue sunrise to sunrise, this would be an 8-day event if sunrise to sunrise was true, but it's not. It's a 7-day event. That's why it says it's the 15th day, 7 days, you should eat unleavened bread. Likewise with the Day of Atonement, we know it's a day of atonement, not 2 days of atonement. So when it says it's the 10th day and it's the 9th day from even to even, that tells you the definition of what the 10th day is. The 10th day is when the 9th ends at sunset, and it ends when it hits sunset again. Now the 10th is over. All right? This is the one I didn't include the frame in part 5, but I have it in here. I did discuss it though. The book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah chapter 13, verses 19 to 21. It came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut. Now, this idea the gates began to be dark is not saying it was dark that's in the sky. It's talking about the shadows of the gates coming down. The shadows are lengthening before the Sabbath. So the sun is going down on the horizon, the shadows are lengthening from the gates, and at that point, he commands the gates should be shut, in charge they should not be opened until after Sabbath. So he's showing here that the Sabbath is soon approaching. The sun is almost down because the length of the shadows is going out. And then he says, some of my servants I set at the gates that there should be no burden brought in on the Sabbath. So the merchants and the sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them and said, why do you lodge about the wall? If you do so again, I'm going to lay hands on you. It doesn't mean he was going to ordain them. He was going to arrest them. All right? He says, from that time forth, they came no more on the Sabbath. So again, you follow this through. Here they are. They're showing up right about the time he's got to shut the gates. They're there. They're waiting then because the gates are shut. And they decide to just lodge outside the wall. Then he says, why are you coming here? You do it again. And then he says they came no more on the Sabbath. So the evidence here is that when they were lodging, which is when they showed up and they lodged, that was Sabbath. They lodged at night. They didn't lodge during the day. So it shows that they were showing up at sunset, lodging a night, and wanting to come in to sell their goods. He says, nope, stop doing this. So here again is evidence that days are suns at the sunset. We also saw an example from the Damascus document, which is amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, as well as was also found in Cairo, in some of the there's a huge load of manuscripts found there, and back in 1897. This was found again in 1947 in Qumran. And one of the texts says, no one should do any work on the sixth day from the time when the sphere of the sun is distant from the gate by its full size. This is why it said, guard the Sabbath and sanctify it. In other words, when the sun's going down and you have the sun coming down, and when it's about its full size, about to hit the horizon, they would stop doing labor. They would guard. They put a fence around the law to protect the Sabbath, to sanctify it. And so they started a little earlier, prior to sunset. That document's from around 150 BCE. BCE means before our common era, or what some people would say BC, before Christ. Also, in the first century, we have the witness of Joseph ben Netanyahu, also known as Flavius Josephus. In his War of the Jews, book 4, he says, describing what was happening there at the temple, he says, at the last, the large tower was erected above the top of the Pasiphoria, where one of the priests stood, of course, and he gave a signal beforehand with a trumpet at the beginning of every seventh day, in the evening twilight, and also at the evening when the day was finished, as giving notice to the people when they were to stop work and when they were to go back to work again. So the priest would go out with a trumpet, and at the evening he would sound the trumpet saying stop work, and at the next evening he would say you can go back to work. This is done every seventh day. Now this point here that the Sabbath is given as part of the Decalogue, or part of the Ten Commandments, and it stands apart from the annual appointed times. This is specifically a rebuttal to claims of lunar Sabbath. See, the claim of lunar Sabbath is people will go in and they'll cite like Genesis 1:14, where he's coming forward. He says that he made the sun and the moon. He made the greater light and the lesser light, and he made these things to mark times and seasons and days and months and years. And the word seasons is the Hebrew word moedim. And so here again, and now please learn this because we keep seeing the same error come over and over and over again. It's when you take a word and you just want to use it in one definition and narrowly define it. And so they take the word moedim, and it always, always, always is reference to a holy day. And it's not. It's not. That's falsehood. Jeremiah talks about the storks know their moedim. The storks don't keep the feast, people. All right? The storks don't keep the feast. But things have different appointed times. Doesn't mean that they're all holy days. Okay? So some things that I like to do is they'll then take that argument, because they'll take Genesis, then they'll go over to Psalm 104, which is a song about Genesis, about the creation days. And he says that the sun knows it's going down, and he made the moon for the Moedim. Then they'll go from that, and they'll come over here to Leviticus 23. So he speak to the children of Israel, say to them concerning the Moedim of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are mine, and 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. Look, Sabbath is a Moedim. Moedims are marked by the moon. Therefore, you Sabbath keepers who keep it on Saturday are wrong. No. Nice twist of scripture, though. But that's not the reality. There's a literary device used in scripture. Here's one example. Again, when I do the full refutation of lunar Sabbath, I'll hit more into more examples of this idea known as resumptive repetition. Because here's what happens. If you notice, verse 2 and verse 4 are basically the same things being said. Speak to the children of Israel, say to them, concerning the feast of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations, even these are my feasts. Now he's going to pause and talk about a slightly connected subject. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the rest, a holy convocation. You should do no work therein. It's the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. Resuming, resumptive repetition. I'm going to now resume what I began to tell you about. I'm going to resume that because I'm going to repeat what I just talked about to show you we're now changing subjects back to the original subject. It is, these are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you should proclaim in their seasons. So it's saying the same thing I said before. Hey, I'm going to tell you about the feast. Well, let me remind you about the Sabbath. Okay, now I'm going to come back and tell you about the feast. Not only is it here, we also see here, when he's done listing them, he says, these are the feasts of the Lord, which is proclaimed to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire to the Lord, burnt offering, meal offering, a sacrifice, and drink offerings, everything upon his day, besides the Sabbath of the Lord, and besides your gifts and your vows, and besides your freewill offerings that you give to the Lord. These feasts are beside the Sabbath. And remember, there's a distinction between the Sabbath and the feast days. There's the Shabbat and the Shabbaton. So the feast days, these particular Moedims, are separate from the Sabbath of the fourth commandment. Even though it's listed at the start of verse, in verse 3 there, but here again, it's shown that it's really separate. What's happening is resumptive repetition. I'm going to tell you about the feast. Wait, hold on. I'll remind you about the Sabbath. Now I'm going to come back and tell you about the feast. Let's talk about the feast. Now, these are the things you do besides the Sabbath. We also see, as you go through several scriptures, I'm not going to lay these all out here today, but if you want to note these down, time and time again, you will see that when it goes through the list of Sabbaths, new moons, and Moedim. Sabbaths, new moons, and Moedims. And it ain't going to say Moedim because it's going to give us an English word. And it'll say solemn feast or feast or festivals or whatever. But 1 Chronicles 23:31, 2 Chronicles 2:4, 2 Chronicles 8:13, 2 Chronicles 31:3, Nehemiah 10:33, and Lamentations 2:6 are just examples where you're going to find Sabbaths, new moons, and Moedim. If Sabbath's one of the Moedim, why is it listed separately? Over and over and over and over. An example, to offer all the burnt offerings of the Lord under Sabbath and the new moons under set feast. Here's one of the examples where it says set feast. That's Moedim by numbers, according to the order that is commanded continually before the Lord. So these things are there like that, all throughout. Now, the Sabbath is not date specific. It's day specific, it's not date specific. Again, even as we look at Leviticus 23, you notice a difference here. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath. But you look at the rest of these things, with one exception, that's counted from the Sabbath. Well, that's the day of Pentecost. The rest of them are all date specific. Verse 5, the 14th day of the first month, Ben Harbaim, is the time to sacrifice the Passover. Verse 6, the 15th day of the same month is the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days. Verse 11, wave the sheaf on the Nimacharat HaShabbat, morrow after the Sabbath. So that one's related to the Sabbath. It's not date specific. It's day specific. So 2 appointed times are day specific. The Sabbath and Shavuot or Pentecost. Wave sheaf included. Let's talk about the wave sheaf. That's going to be the count to Pentecost. Leviticus 23:15-16, count from you from the morrow after the Sabbath. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even to the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you number 50 days. Okay. Verse 24, the 7th month, in the first day of the month, you shall have a Shabbaton, a memorial of blowing the trumpets. Verse 24, so that one's on the first day of the 7th month. It's not a day of the week. It's a date of the month. Leviticus 23:27-32, the 10th day of the 7th month, which is the 9th day, at even, from even, to even. It's a date of the month. In Leviticus 23:34-36, speak to the children of Israel, saying the 15th day of this month shall be a Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days, and on the 8th day have a holy convocation. It's dates of the month. Only the Sabbath is not listed by dates. If the Sabbath was always 8, 15, 22, and 29, why doesn't it say so? Nowhere, I mean nowhere in Scripture is Sabbath ever said to be related to the moon or given as the 8th, 15th, 22nd, or 29th days of the month anyway. Now, when I first heard this doctrine, I first read of it, actually the first time I heard of it, someone else had already succumbed to it. Another ministry, actually 2 other ministries that I was aware of, had succumbed to this doctrine from Jonathan David Brown. And so I first read of it from them and seeing where they were at. And I'm like, oh, okay, let me give this some thought. And as always, I'm willing to put everything to the test. I'm willing to lay, if I'm wrong, I'll lay it down and I'll pick something up if that's true. Okay, so let me look at this. And they had this big slew of scholarly quotes. And look at this rabbi admitting this. Look at this encyclopedia admitting this. Look at this over here. Look at this over here. And all these kinds of quotes. I'm like, okay, let me stop and consider. And so I stopped and considered. But then the first thing that came to my mind was Creation Week. And I said, how does that jive? And it doesn't. And then the second thing I thought of was the count to Pentecost. I'm like, how does that jive? It's impossible. You can't begin a count on the morrow after a Sabbath, count 7 weeks, and end it on the morrow after the Sabbath, and have it be 50 days. You see, when I first ran into this, they switched up what they're doing. Because when I first ran into it, they would say, oh, new moon days don't count. Because it would always be like 53 days or something, because there's extra days in there because the new moon days aren't part of their weeks. So I'm like, this will never equal 50. Oh, because you don't count the new moon days. Oh, really? Where's that in the Scripture? How does that work? And now many of them have switched it to what they're doing. Oh, you count 7 weeks, then you count 50 days. So they're doing a Pentecost on the 29th day of the 4th month. And it always works out to be that way for them. But yeah, that's nowhere in Scripture either. And there's no conjunctive to say, once you do this, then count that. It's not in the Hebrew. It doesn't allow for that count. Exemplary Sabbath. So I looked at the Sabbath. What's going on with this? Day 1, there's no moon in existence. Day 2, no moon in existence. Day 3, no moon in existence. Day 4, he created the greater and lesser lights and the stars, and he placed them in the firmament to begin keeping time, which means they weren't timekeepers before that. Now they are, on day 4. So that means that's their first day of their existence, because again, count in Scripture is inclusive. So day 4 would be day 1 of the moon, day 5, second day of the moon, day 6, the third day of the moon, and day 7 is the fourth day of the moon, but some reason God rested that day and not on the 8th day of the moon. He rested on the 4th day of the moon. So that's the first thing is that, yeah, they got some issue here. Their claim for that is, oh, well, you don't know what phase he made it in. Maybe he made it in a phase where those days later it became the 8th day of the moon. Yes, because he's the one who likes to like be confusion, because oh wait, he's not the author of confusion. Okay, so his example here is that when he created things, he didn't have the moon be the first thing that was done and then wait 8 days. That's not the example that was set forth, that was used as a pattern given in Exodus 20 of why you do things. Okay. For here, I'm going to flip to some scriptures. So flip some scriptures with me. Numbers chapter 10. I'm going to give you a couple examples of lunar Sabbath dates that cannot be Sabbaths based on what they say. Numbers chapter 10, he says in verse 11, because you remember when they were in the wilderness, when a cloud would pick up, it's time to pick up camp and go. When the cloud would come down, it's time to stop. So it says in verse 11, it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month in the second year that the cloud was taken up from off the tabernacle of the testimony. And then they took their journey out of the wilderness of Sinai, and the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. And so they're going. And then we come on down. You can follow the text. I'm not going to read it all into the record here. We come down into verse 33. They departed from the mount of the Lord. This is when they left Sinai, the mount of the Lord, 3 days' journey. And the ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them in 3 days' journey to search out a resting place for them. So they journeyed for 3 days. That's the 20th, the 21st, and 22nd, which means they were journeying on lunar Sabbath. That some reason God had them marching, carrying all their gear here on the Sabbath day in their trek. I would say this is not a Sabbath. Turn over to Joshua. Joshua chapter 1, verse 11. I want to remind you what I just told you about what happened in the wilderness in Exodus 16. God showed them what the Sabbath was by raining down bread from heaven for 6 days. And so for 40 years, they were told, here's how you observe Sabbath. You don't cook on Sabbath. You don't go gather your food on Sabbath. You don't prepare your victuals. You prepare them on preparation day, which is the day before Sabbath. The 6th day, you prepare your food. You gather it. You gather twice as much. You prepare it all. You bake what you're going to bake, boil what you're going to boil, fry what you're going to fry. Whatever you're going to do it. Hit your toaster, do it. But you do not cook on the Sabbath day. So they just learned that for 40 years in the wilderness. Now here they are. They're coming out of the wilderness, coming into the promised land in Joshua chapter 1. They haven't entered it in yet, but here they are. Verse 11, chapter 1, he says, pass through the host and command the people, prepare you victuals, for within 3 days you shall pass over the Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God gives you to possess it. Okay, so what day did they cross the Jordan? You guys remember? I gave you a clue up on the screen. Chapter and verse. Chapter 4, verse 19 says, the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. They encamped at Gilgal in the east border of Jericho. Now again, let's use an inclusive count. If 10 is the 3rd day, that means 9 is the 2nd day, which means the day Joshua told them to prepare food was the 8th day of the month. Was Joshua, after 40 years of having them keep the Sabbath holy by not cooking on it, now telling them you cook food today because it's the Sabbath day? No. So herein is evidence that the 8th day of that month was not a Sabbath. All right. As long as we're in Joshua chapter 5, we'll hit more on this in probably I think the next one I'll be dealing with Pentecost, the next session. In Joshua chapter 5, it says in verse 10 that the children of Israel encamped in Gilgal, and they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month, Ba'erev, in the plains of Jericho. And they ate of the grain of the land on the morrow after the Passover. They ate unleavened cakes, parched corn in the self-same day. Now, if you recall the law, hold your place there in Joshua. Come back to Leviticus 23. And notice that he was told, verse 9. Excuse me. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, say, when you be come into the land. Did Joshua bring him into the land? Yes, they did. They crossed the Jordan. They're at Gilgal. They had just kept the Passover inside the land. You shall reap the harvest thereof, and bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted before you on the day after the Sabbath. The priest shall do it. You shall offer that day when you wave the sheaf a he lamb without blemish, so on and so forth. Verse 14, you shall eat neither bread, nor parched, nor green ears, until the selfsame day that you brought this offering unto the Lord. So, this is a direct fulfillment of what was said. When you become into the land, Joshua brings them into the land. Don't eat bread or parched until you offer this offering of the wave sheaf. They ate grain of the land on the morrow after the Passover. They ate unleavened and they ate parched. So this tells us one of two things. Joshua and the children of Israel brazenly sinned and ate the grain of the land before they were supposed to, or, even though it's not stated, they offered the wave sheaf. In looking through the text, I see no condemnation heaven upon Joshua. He's continually blessed. God is continually with them, both before and after this incident. But I would say Joshua did not sin in what he did. So Joshua he ate the bread, he ate the parched, the kalui, which is reference to the fresh aviv that it was aviv when they came there. And so here he is at Passover time, roasting aviv barley and eating it after they offered up the wave sheaf. Now, what is this showing here? This is showing us here that the wave sheaf happens on the day after the Sabbath. So on the day after the Sabbath, that's the first day of the week. Right? So this means when they ate the grain, they ate them on the 15th. Because you got to wave the sheaf during the days of unleavened bread. It's always, always, always the first day of the week during unleavened bread. That means the 15th fell on the first day of the week. Right? You understand that? Because that's why they offered the bread or offered the wave sheaf. That's how they ever eat the bread, because it fell on the 15th. If it fell on the 15th, that means the 15th was not on Sabbath. The 14th was on Sabbath. Passover sacrifice fell on Sabbath. So another evidence that the Sabbath in that month was on the 14th. That month it was the 7, 14, 21, and 28, not 8, 15, 22, and 29. 1 Samuel chapter 20. Remember the whole incident with David and Jonathan discussing the new moon and discussing matters regarding King Saul, and if Saul was out to get David or not. So in 1 Samuel 20, it says, let's see. I'll start in verse 1 just to get the context. David fled from Naioth into Ramah and came therefore and said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity? What is my sin before your father that he seek in my life? And he said to him, God forbid that you should not die. Behold, my father will do nothing great or small, but that he will show it to me. Why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. So David swore moreover and said, your father certainly knows that I have found grace in your eyes. And he says, let not Jonathan know this, lest he be grieved. But truly as the Lord lives, you shall put, and as your soul lives, there shall be a step between me and death. Then said Jonathan to David, whatsoever your soul desires, I will even do it for you. So David said to Jonathan, behold, tomorrow is the new moon. I should not fail to sit with the king at dinner. But let me go, and I will hide myself in the field until the third day at even. If your father at all miss me, say, David earnestly has asked leave of me that he might run to Bethlehem, his city. There's a yearly sacrifice there for all my family. If he says thus, it is well. Your servant shall have peace. But if he is very wroth, then sure that evil is determined by him. Therefore he shall deal kindly with your servant, and you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. Notwithstanding, if there's within me any iniquity, slay me yourself. Why should you bring me to your father? Jonathan said, far be it from you. I know certainly that evil were determined by my father to come upon you, then I wouldn't I tell you? And David says to Jonathan, who shall tell me? What if your father answers you roughly? Um, Jonathan said to David, come and let us go out to the field. And they went out to the field. And Jonathan said to David, Lord God of Israel, when I saw my father about tomorrow, any time, or the third day, behold, if there's good towards David, and I don't send to you, show it to you. The Lord do such and such more to Jonathan. And so he's saying, notice here too the context. So it's the last day of the month because tomorrow's the new moon, and he's saying tomorrow, and then the third day, because remember it's inclusive count. So day one is the day they're talking. It's the last day of the month. Day two will be new moon day, and day three will be the second day of the month. All right, understand that? Is that clear? Okay. And so here's where they come up with the concept of doing the ruse, because he says in verse 18, Jonathan says to David, tomorrow's the new moon. You're going to be missed because your seat's going to be empty. So when you've stayed 3 days, go down quickly. I'm going to shoot this arrow. I'm going to say this. We're going to do that. And then we'll have our little get together and I'll let you know what's up with my dad. So verse 24, David hid himself in the field. And when the new moon was come, the king sat down to eat. And he was like, hey, wondering where David was. And it came to pass, verse 27, it came to pass on the morrow, which was the second day of the month, that David's place was empty. And Saul said to Jonathan, hey, why isn't the son of Jesse come to eat yesterday or today? And he says, oh, he had this thing to do with Bethlehem and so on and so forth. Okay. So, again, it's the last day of the month, day one, new moon day, which is day one of the month, but it's day two of these 3 days that David's hiding himself in the field. And day two of the month is the third day that David's hiding himself in the field. So then he goes out, Jonathan and Dad get into a tiff, and then Jonathan goes out, shoots his arrows, goes to talk to David. Here's the deal. Okay? Tells him go in peace. Well, guess what? The story doesn't end there just because the chapter ends. It continues. Chapter 21, verse 1. Then came David to Nob, to Abimelech, the priest. And Abimelech was afraid at the meeting of David and said to him, why are you alone, and no man with you? David said to Abimelech, the priest, the king has commanded me a business, and he said to me, let no one know anything of what you're doing, that I'm sending you, and do what I command you. I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now, therefore, what is under your hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever that you have there, because the priest is out there carrying these loaves of bread. He's like, let me get that. And the priest said to David, this is not common bread that's under my hand. It's hallowed bread. Remember the showbread talked about, and that's always before the presence of the Lord. And he says, this is not common bread under my hand, it's hallowed bread. But if the young men that you're with have kept themselves at least from women, David answered and said to the priest, of a truth, women have I kept from these 3 days since I've come out, and the vessels of the young man are holy, and the bread that in a manner is now common, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him the hello bread, because there's no bread but the show bread that was taken before the Lord to put hot bread in that day when it was taken away. What day is the show bread changed out? It's changed out every Sabbath. David says that bread was holy in the vessel today, but in a sense it's not, because now you got new show bread in there. So in a way that's kind of common. How about you give it to me anyways? What day of the month? What date of the month is it? It's the second day of the month, because it's the third day that David's been out in the field. He's kept himself from women this whole time. It's now the second day of the month. He sees the priest, says, give me the showbread that you just traded out today. So this shows the Sabbaths that month were the 2nd, the 9th. They didn't match the lunar folks. So here again, sorry, lunar folk, it doesn't work out for you. Example from the New Testament, John chapter 7. In season. We know here is in verse 2, it was the Feast of Tabernacles at hand. They go up, and now here it's time for the feast. He says in verse 10 that he went up to the feast openly, the blessed were not openly, but in secret. So he went up and he was there. And while he's there at the feast, he comes into the last great day. The last day, that great day. And that word great is the Greek word megos, which is elsewhere translated high. It's the high day. In other words, it's talking about like the first day of the feast or the 8th day of the feast or the first day of unleavened bread or the last day of unleavened bread. Those are the high days. Those are what the New Old Testament will call Shabbaton days. Here they're called high days. So he says it's the last day, the high day of the feast. And he stood, anyone thirsty, let him come unto me, as the scripture says. And so this he did. And so this would be the 22nd day of the 7th month. We just experienced this a couple days ago when I spoke back on Wednesday. And so follow the context through. Again, I'm not going to read all this chapter for chapter here, but follow it through. And he's having this discussion with them or whatever. And then it says at the end of chapter 7, every man went to his own house. Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Now, early in the morning came he again to the temple. So now here he is. It's now the next day. And it's now the 23rd of the month. And he's there at the temple and he's teaching. And this woman caught in adultery, and the Pharisees bring him. What should we do with this? Has the whole instance of the woman caught in adultery, the whole thing. Abraham saw my day. The whole, if you are of your father Abraham, all that's happening. Continue reading all the way through. We hit the end of chapter 8 when they're taking up stones to cast at him in verse 59. But Jesus hid himself. He went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Well, guess what? There was no chapter breaks in John's writing either. And as Jesus passed by, chapter 9, verse 1, he saw a man who was blind from birth. His disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did this sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, neither does this man sin nor his parents, but that the works of God should be manifested in him. I must work the works of him that sent me. While it is day, the night comes when no man can work. As long as I'm in the world, I am the light of the world. Then he spat on the ground, made clay a spittle, anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, told him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, go to Sent. He went this way, therefore, and washed and came seeing. And neighbors, therefore, which had seen him and knew that he was blind, said, this is not the guy who was sitting and begging. Isn't that the blind guy? Yeah, that's him. Others said, nah, he just looks like him. So he said, no, it's me. I'm him. Therefore they said, well, how were your eyes opened? And he says, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said unto me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. And I went and washed, and I've received my sight. Well, really? I don't know. They brought him to the Pharisees, and They brought him to the Pharisees, the guy who was blind, and it was the Sabbath day when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. This is now the day after the last great day. In other words, it's the 23rd day of the month, and it's the Sabbath day. Another evidence within Scripture against the 8, 15, 22, and 29 notion of lunar Sabbath. There's more, but I will not belabor the point with that today. I will also show evidence from here, the Mishnah, regarding the Sabbath and how it is merely the seventh day and not date specific. The Mishnah, again, is a commentary written upon the written about the Torah. It covers from 200 BC to 200 CE of the Common Era. And here's some examples. If the eve of Passover in Jerusalem falls on a Sabbath, so the eve of Passover would be the 14th if it falls on a Sabbath. Then again, if the 14th falls on a Sabbath, if the 14th of Nisan falls on a Sabbath, from Kesakim 49. How is that possible if it's always the 8, 15, 22, 29? It's not possible. History stands against that. On the eve of the Passover, it is slaughtered, whether it's a weekday or the Sabbath. If the 16th falls on the Sabbath, from Pesakim 83a. If the festive day of the New Year, this is again, remember they falsely called Rosh Hashanah, they called trumpets Rosh Hashanah the New Year. But they say if the festive day of the New Year fell on a Sabbath, this is in Rosh Hashanah, or if Rosh Hashanah happened to fall on a Sabbath. So they're saying here the first day of the month would fall on a Sabbath. That's impossible, completely impossible lunar Sabbath, because lunar Sabbath says there's three types of days. There's a new moon day, there's work days, and there's the Sabbath day, and they can never land on the same day. But here we're having the new moon fall on Sabbath. Trumpets falling on Sabbath. If the Day of Atonement fell on a Sabbath, from Minakot, 100 day, or if the Sabbath and the Day of Atonement followed each other, that means if the Sabbath fell on a Friday, if Atonement fell on a Friday or fell on a Sunday. These are also evidence. These are some of the evidences that I've used to show why we don't go by the rabbinic calendar, because these things also refute the postponement rules, because they never allow atonement to fall on a Friday or a Sunday. But here's evidence from their own Jewish writings that they used to. When the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles falls on Sabbath, that means it doesn't always fall on the Sabbath. So the 15th, they want to say it's always going to fall on the Sabbath. Well, no, it talks about when it does. It doesn't always do it. If the first day of the festival falls on the Sabbath, it doesn't always do that. That's in Sukkah, about Tabernacles. And on the Sabbath, which fell during the feast of Sukkah. So you have a Sabbath in the midst of Sukkah. On the eve of the Sabbath, in the intermediate days of the Sukkah festival. So that means there is a Sabbath happening somewhere between days 1 and day 8 of the feast. If Purim falls on the Sabbath, Purim is the 14th and 15th days. If the 9th of Ab falls on the Sabbath, likewise if the eve of the 9th of Ab falls on the Sabbath. These are all evidences that in the first century these things weren't happening. This is again, and why is that important? We don't have to go back to creation to establish when the Sabbath is. We can establish it by the mark of the Master. What was happening in Jesus' day, because Jesus walked in the truth. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And what he did is our example unto us. He kept the proper Sabbath. If the Sabbath falls on a new moon or on the intermediate days of a festival, when the first of Adar falls on a Sabbath, the portion of Shekalim is read. If it falls on any other day, the portion is just going on with the portions. If the new moon of Ab falls on a Sabbath, if the beginning of the month of Tebeth falls on a Sabbath, so on and so forth. So, Scripture and history are evident that the Sabbath could be any date of the month. It does not restrict it to 7, 14, 21, 28 is the first. That's what Jonathan David Brown taught. It's not restricted to 8, 15, 22, 29, which is the prominent lunar Sabbath teaching these days. It's just simply the seventh day of a consistent uninterrupted cycle of Sabbath. I touched on this already with the manna. Gather it every man according to his eating, an omer for every man, according to the number of your persons. Gathered some gathered some more, some gathered less, but when they meted that with an omer, he that gathered much had nothing over, he that gathered little had no lack. So, with a lunar Sabbath scenario, what's going to happen is you're going to have certain months at the end of your month where you're going to have an extra day. So unless, and I say this facetiously, tongue in cheek, unless you're having a fast day every week because all you're getting is manna for 2 days, not for 3, because they'll say it's 6-day manna gathering day, Sabbath, and then extra moon day. And now you start to count again. Well, there's not enough manna for that. In the 40 years, you gather the omer, no more, no less. You gather double. There's nothing about gathering triple. Nowhere in there. It shows it was continuous. There's no interruption by new moon days. It's you got our daily bread. You get it on the 6th day. It's twice as much as you got our daily. Here's what I'm saying: you get twice as much. You never get triple. It's 2 omers for a man on the 6th day. Never 3. Never 4. Doesn't happen. Bible Judea says, if one reckons, he will find that this heavenly food was given in exact correspondence with the arrangement instituted at the creation of the world. For God began to create the world on the first day of the week of 6 days, and he began to rain down food, which had just been mentioned on that same first day. So again, this is the thing that marks what the Sabbath is. It isn't marked by the moon. It's marked by the manna. Because it happens all the time. Now this one, we saw this previous, but my point here is I want to bring out, he says it happens every 7th day. It's not sometimes the 8th day, because there's a moon that made a week extra long. It's every 7th day. His work against Apion. It says there are people called the Jews that dwell in the city. The strongest of all cities was inhabitants called Jerusalem, and are accustomed to rest on every 7th day, on which times they make no use of their arms. So every 7th day. It doesn't fluctuate. Antiquities of the Jews from Josephus, he says that he found these priests 24 courses, 16 of the house of Eleazar, 8 to that of Ithamar, and he ordained that one course should minister to God 8 days from Sabbath to Sabbath. Notice Josephus knows how to count too. He counts inclusively. Sabbath to Sabbath is 8 days, because you count this one Sabbath they minister, then you count 6 days of work, and then the next Sabbath on the 7th day, he says that's 8 days. There's no interruption. They minister Sabbath to Sabbath, 8 days. This is how the priest worked. There was no interruption. That one had to work an extra day every month or every other month. He made 24 parts of the tribe of Levi. When they cast lots, they came up in the same manner for their courses of 8 days. Their course was always 8 days, Sabbath to Sabbath. There's no interruption. It's a contiguous cycle. Philo Judaeus, also the 1st century Jew out of Alexandria, he said, after the continued in uninterrupted festival, which lasts through all time, which is the day, like 2 days, tomorrow, the daily offerings, there's another celebrated, namely that of the sacred 7th day after each recurring interval of 6 days, proclaiming a day of freedom to them also after every space of 6 days, having a relaxation every 6 days. And I will use Philo because lunar Sabbath people want to claim that he taught lunar Sabbath. He did not. And I'll show you where they want to say that. I won't get into all of it today, but I'll show you one of the things. The number 7 was also greatly honored by Moses, a man much attached to excellence of all sorts, who described the beauty on the most holy pillars of the law, wrote it in the hearts of all those who were subject to him, commanding them at the end of each period of 6 days to keep the 7th holy. Again, back to back, contiguous. Now here's one of the ones they use. Even though this actually is evidence against them, they read into it something that says something different. The 4th commandment has reference to the sacred 7th day, that it may be passed in a sacred and holy manner. Now some states, meaning some nations or countries, keep the holy festival only once in the month, counting from the new moon, as a day sacred to the Almighty. But the nation of the Jews keeps every 7th day regularly after each interval of 6 days. So he says there are nations out there who keep a form of a Sabbath. They count from the new moon. They keep one day holy each month as a rest. There's some evidence that he might be talking about Babylon, and that they kept the 7th day of the month as a rest day. So now the way the lunar Sabbath people want to read this is that, oh look, he's comparing, well, there's some who keep it once a month, but we keep it continually throughout the month, therefore we keep it right. We keep it by the new moon. That's not what he's saying. He's contrasting those who do it once a month, they come from the new moon, but we keep it after every seventh day regularly after each interval of 7 days. It's a contrast between counting from the new moon or doing it after every interval of 6 days. That's the contrast. Philo was not a lunatic. Sabbath and the planetary week. Okay, because there's much to do about the planetary week. We're going to quote here, the week with its attribution to each day of 1 to the 7 planets is one of the most ancient institutions of the Babylonians. This nation commenced with the hebdomadal, which is 7-day period with the sun, followed by the moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Every planet in succession presided over 24 hours, but not in the order assumed for their spheres, which was the sun, Venus, Mercury, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. This is the order assumed for their spheres, but when they assigned an hour, the initial hour of the first day was consecrated to the sun, and the 25th hour would be the initial hour of the second day. So that went to the moon. Then the 49th to Mars, the 73rd to Mercury, the 97th to Jupiter, the 121st to Venus, and the 145th to Saturn. Okay. Now, what's important with understanding this is where people derive horoscopes from. Okay. Hour. It had to do with the hours, and that's why they said this god is over this day from whatever. So that's how they got the order, by assigning hours, and it's 24-hour per day. And they said these 24 hours correspond. This one begins with the sun, therefore the sun is the first day. Here's the second day because the 25th hour falls on moon. So that's moon day, Monday, so on and so forth on down the line. So they would not change the order of days because that would affect their horoscopes. They would not shift their days because it had to do with their deities and their horoscopes. Now, it has been claimed that this arrangement is of a more modern invention, but indications of its existence are found in the earliest texts. Now, the Mosaic account of creation, of course, ignored the assignment of the weekdays to diverse stars. It doesn't say day one in the earth, the evening and the morning were Sunday. In the evening and the morning were Monday. It doesn't say that. It was day 1, it was day 2, day 3. It doesn't say it's the various stars. Independently of all astral influence, the 7th day was instituted as a sacred day, quite distinct in character from the 7th day of the lunar synodic month, which was regarded as a holy day by the Chaldeans, which is what Philo was talking about. The 7th day of the week is different from the 7th day of the month. They're not always the same. The Sabbath is not based It's independent of all astral influence. If you stop and think on it, back when I went through with the exemplary Sabbath, the week is unhooked from the year and the month of that, because the week began before the month and the year even began, because there was no sun or moon until day 4, which mark these times of a beginning of a month and a year. It's independent of those things. The Sabbath is actually, if you can understand the term, the Sabbath of a friend of mine, we would use the term transcalendrical. Means the Sabbath does not need a calendar to be able to count it. There's no need of a calendar. You can find the Sabbath. If you can count the 7, you don't need a calendar. It's transcalendrical. It's not based on the moon or the stars and those type of things. Aristobulus of Alexandria, he was a Jew, circa 160 BCE, so that's about 160 years before Jesus, thereabouts. He says, we understand the fixed sphere as a quiet and pleasant place, and by the 7 days, each motion of the 7 planets. So I want to establish here that they already understood the planetary week in 160 BCE, because people want to claim there was no planetary week happening in the 1st century. And I'll tell you, you're a liar, because this is 2nd century BC. The planetary week is already known by Jews. It's also known and in use, and I'll show examples of the planetary week being in use in Rome, which was the empire that had reigned over Judea and Israel in the days of Jesus Christ on earth. Here's a calendar from the Baths of Titus. All right. A little bit dark here. Let me see if I think I got a little bit brighter version here next. But if you can make that out there at the top, those are images of the gods. This is what's known as, this calendar type of calendar is known as a parapegma. In other words, it's a peg calendar. Let me give you a little brighter version. This is also filled in up here. If you notice, up at the top, you got the god with the sky, the harvester. That's Saturn. Next to him, no, that's not the Statue of Liberty. That's the sun god. That's the sun coming out. Next, that's the Tiara, because that's the crescent moon. That's the moon god. All right. Then you got Mars, the god of war. You got Mercury. You got Thor, and last but not least, you got Venus. Okay. So because Rome, if you remember, Rome was originally called Saturnia. Sure. They had Saturn at the head of their week. Right? So Rome had a planetary week. But not only did it have the planetary week, you also see here numbers 1 through 30, because that was to mark the days of the lunar month. Notice there is no 31, because this was the lunar calendar. You also had there in the middle the horoscopes. Well, I should say, I guess you can say, yeah, Scorpio and all those things right there in the middle, the zodiac. Yep. All right. So this is found from the Baths of Titus. When did Titus exist? 1st century. Did Rome have a planetary week in the 1st century? Yes, they did. All right. So let's push in and see some more. Here's paintings found at Herculaneum. These paintings were found, and how do we know that they're pre-79 CE, Jeff? What happened in 79? Vesuvius happened in 79. Vesuvius was a volcano that blew and buried a couple of places. One that they buried was Herculaneum. So we know that these paintings are before Vesuvius exploded. Guess what they show? These were all in a row. I know I have them separated here because I wanted you to be able to see the details, but it was all in a row, Saturn through Venus, paintings upon a wall to show that they had a planetary week. And they had pegs to mark where these things were. So you can mark your day. Well, did they have planetary week in the first century or no? Yes, they did, without doubt. This is before Vesuvius. Not only do they have them at Herculaneum, they have them at Pompeii. Why is it important with Pompeii? For the same reason. There's graffiti at Pompeii, and therefore earlier in 79, it says 9 days before the calends of June, Sunday, or it says in D Solis. Of course, it ain't written in English, but it's it's written in Latin. And it also says 10 days before the Ides of February, on Sunday, on the 16th day of the moon, market day at Cumae, 5 days before the market day at Pompeii. This is good stuff, and it's actually will tie into the next thing we're going to look at. Okay, so this shows that they did have a planetary week in place. We see it from Aristobulus. It's there in the 2nd century BC. It's in the 1st century BC, and it's in the 1st century. Okay, so did Rome use an 8-day week? Because people want to claim Rome used an 8-day week. They didn't have a 7-day week. No, they did not. They had an 8-day market cycle that we just read about with the market here and the market there. It's what's known as the noonday. And guess what noonday means? 9 days, even though it's an 8-day cycle. Why? Because it counts inclusively. Because that's how everyone counted in those days. They counted inclusively. It's known as the noonday. And so you see here at the top, I kind of have a redo of the stone down at the bottom because it's kind of hard to see that. Saturn, Rome, Solis, Capve, Lune. So you're having at the top Saturn, Sun, Moon, Tuesday, Mars. And down below it are different cities. Rome, Capve, Galatia, Benev. And they each got holes to mark what day it is and what city's going to hold the market. This is a market cycle. It is not an 8-day week. Well, it's a broken stone there, Ronnie. 3 of the days are missing and 4 of the cities are missing. That's the Polypsum Parapegma from the 1st century BC. Yes. Yep, Tuesday. Marty. Yep. Back to the Future. The ancient Etruscans of northern Italy are said to have possessed an 8-day market week, but such an assertion is not technically correct. Remember, Rome was built upon the work of the Etruscans. Neither the Romans nor their predecessors possessed a word to denote this space of time. The country people were accustomed to coming to an urban center, such as Rome, for their market days called the noonday, or the 9th days. By our mode of reckoning, which is not inclusive like the Romans, the 9 days are actually count out to 8 days. But since the classics never placed noonday by itself to indicate a time unit, it cannot be claimed that this was an 8-day cycle, an 8-day week. It's not a cycle. It's just where the market was taking place. Yeah. The fact that a market day of one city fell on a different day than the market day of a nearby neighboring city also militates against the assumption that noonday were held as an 8-day week, because they would differ based on where you're at, where you're saying the market is. This is a block that they found. If you notice here at the top, you will see UR and then Jovis and then Veneer at the very top by Jove, which is that's Thor, Thursday, and Veneris, Friday, Frigga. Yeah. But you also see it mentions lunar, and off there's like this rosette design off to the side with a bunch of places to put your pegs at the 30 days of the month. And then it says right in there, noonday. Agvini indico interam mitern rome cafe cassini sabrat. Little pegs to put your things. But it also mentioned other things upon here. They've worked on this to see that it was like this. They were able to take what was there and build the rest of it out to understand. And you see even mention of February and May, August, Nov, February. See the different months are actually kind of mentioned in the four corners. So even those type of things are in place and being mentioned. These things were understood. This was the Latin, I can't figure what it's called. This is the Sabine calendar found out of Sabine, Italy. This was from 19 BC to 4 AD. And this, instead of using a planetary week, they still show a 7-day cycle of the week and an 8-day cycle of the noonday. Except what they do for those is for both of them, they use the alphabet. So you see how the one is going. It says up the top September 7, 8, 9, 10. Going down, see on the far left column, it says Sept. And the column next to it, it says F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's your 7-day week. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So the next column is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. That's your noonday. That's the 8. So the 7 and the 8 are there. But this is without using the planetary deities or using the names of the cities. But this was to mark the noonday, mark the date of the lunar month, and mark the day of the week. The third column, I'm not sure what the C's and the N's are, or all the little scratch lines after that. Possibly. So the Sabbath and the day is Saturn. 63 BCE. Cassius Dio in Roman history records the attack with Pompey upon the temple at Jerusalem. And he says if they had continued defending it, the temple, on all days alike, he could not have got possession of it. As it was, they made an exception of what are called the days of Saturn, and by doing no work at all on those days, it afforded the Romans an opportunity in the interval to batter down the wall. Thus the defenders were captured on the day of Saturn without making any defense, and all the wealth was plundered. The kingdom was given to Hyrcanus, and Aristobulus was carried away. There's a different Aristobulus. There's a bunch of them. There's a king Aristobulus who is the son of Hyrcanus, John Hyrcanus. Is what was going on here. But this is the days of Pompey coming in. This is also talked about by Flavius Josephus. He says, nor had the Romans succeeded in their endeavors had not Pompey taken notice of the 7th days, on which the Jews abstained from all sorts of work on a religious account. He raised his bank, restrained his soldiers from fighting those days, for the Jews only acted defensively on the Sabbath days. So Josephus is saying, when Pompey came in and he knew he was able to do advances on the 7th days or the Sabbath days, and it's what Cassius Dio says on the days of Saturn. In other words, the days of Saturn are the 7th day, are the Sabbath day. Ovid, he said, you may begin on the day less fit for business, whereupon returns the 7th day feast of the Syrian of Palestine that they observe. Talking about Israel, calling them the Syrians of Palestine, that they observe the 7-day feast as a day less fit for business. And we're going to see this also talked about by other poets of the time. Dio again in 37 BC records another attack. And he says the first of them, this is them capturing the Jews, that the first of them to be captured were those who were fighting for their precinct of their God, meaning the temple, and the rest on the day even then called the day of Saturn. Remember, Aristobulus in 160 says the 7 planets and the 7 days work together. So even then, this day was called the day of Saturn. So excessive were they in their devotion to religion that the first set of prisoners, those who had been captured along with the temple, obtained leave from Sosius when the day of Saturn came round again, and they went to the temple and there performed all the customary rites together with the rest of the people. So they were captured. They begged their captor, hey, we need to go back to the temple. It's the day of Saturn again. We need to go worship. Sosius said, okay, you can go worship. And it was the day of Saturn. They went out to the temple to come worship. Tibullus, 55 to 19 BC, he says, all promised a return, yet did nothing stay her from looking back in tears and terror on my journey. Yea, even I, her comforter, after I had given my parting charge, sought still in my disquiet for reasons to linger and delay. Either birds or words of evil omen were my pretext, or there was a holy day of Saturn to detain me. Yeah, so I need to come up with an excuse not to leave. And all I can say it's the birds or the evil. Oh, there's that holy day of Saturn that's going to detain me from going. I can't travel. So again, we're going to see, I'll include a quote in here from Josephus where he talks about there's not a nation around where our customs haven't come to, including that of the seventh day. And so other nations, they're talking about how the Greeks were keeping the Sabbath and other elements of their lifestyle. They learned from them and they absorbed them into their lives. And so these are all kinds of nations are following our example. During the reign of Tiberius, 14 to 37 CE, the grammarian Diogenes, who used to lecture at every Sabbath at Rhodes, would not admit Tiberius when he came to hear him on a different day, but he sent him a message by a common slave of him, putting him off to the seventh day. And when this man waited before the emperor's door at Rome to pay his respects, Tiberius took on no further revenge and bid him to return 7 years later. So here he was. He would lecture every Sabbath at Rhodes, and it would be the seventh day. That's why I'm going to be there. I'll come lecture the seventh day, which is the Sabbath. This was recorded by Suetonius in the life by Tiberius. And there's again was a Greek keeping these things. Frontinus and Cassius Dio record an attack with Vespasian upon Jerusalem in 70 AD or CE as it's known. Sextus Julius Frontinus said in the Stratagems, the divine Augustus Vespasian attacked the Jews on the day of Saturn, on which it is forbidden for them to do anything serious, and prevailed. And again, Cassius Dio says, thus was Jerusalem destroyed on the very day of Saturn, the day which even now the Jews reverence most. This is 70 AD, 70 CE, Common Era. Saturn worship. Because someone to claim, oh yeah, sure, they were keeping Saturn's day because they were a bunch of Saturn worshippers. Right. Tacitus, Gaius Cornelius Tacitus, 56 to 117 CE, he had said, they were pleased, talking about the Jews, they were pleased to have a rest on the seventh day because it brought a release from work. Later, because they became softened by inactivity, the seventh year was also given to idleness. Some hold it to be an honor of Saturn, or perhaps the Idaeans gave them this part of religion. The Diadensi, as we've said before, were expelled together with Saturn, who's we've been informed were the founders of this Jewish nation, or else it's because the star, Saturn, moves in the highest sphere, and of the 7 planets that exert the principal part of the energy whereby mankind are governed. And indeed, most of the heavenly bodies exert their power and fulfill their courses according to the number 7. So Tacitus is saying he's trying to understand, hey, maybe these Jews do this because of this or that, but he says what they're doing, they're keeping the Sabbath, and maybe it's because they worship Saturn, because he's saying they recognize that Saturn day is the day that they keep. Now, when this all happened, the Jews actually went on to name Saturn the star Sabbath. It's the Sabbath star, because when their Sabbath cycle, as it corresponds to the ways of the Gentiles, it corresponds to the day of Saturn. So they call Saturn Sabbath, the Sabbath star. Now, were they worshiping Saturn? Was that? Here's the claim. Cassius Dio says they are distinguished from the rest of mankind in practically every detail of life, and especially by the fact that they do not honor any of the usual gods. Was Saturn one of the usual gods? You betcha. Right? But they show extreme reverence for one particular divinity. They'd never had any statue of him, even in Jerusalem itself. Leaving him to be unnameable and invisible, they worshiped him in the most extravagant fashion on earth. They built to him a temple that was extremely large and beautiful. Likewise, they dedicate to him the day called the Day of Saturn, on which, among many other peculiar observances, they undertake no serious occupation. What day was Israel keeping Sabbath in the first century? Saturn's Day. It's there in the first century. It's there in the first century before our Common Era, the second century before our Common Era. And we're going to see it's actually even after that. It's continuous. Here's in the second century CE. Just a murder on the day called Sunday. There's a gathering together with the same place of all who live in the city or rural district. We make our assembly in a common on the day of the sun, since it is the first day in which God changed the darkness in matter and made the world. And Jesus Christ, our Savior, rose from the dead on the same day, for they crucified him on the day before Saturn's day, and the day after, which is the day of the sun, he appeared to his apostles and taught his disciples these things. Okay, so here is second century witness that Sabbath is Saturn's day, and the day, what our scripture calls the first day of the week, is known as the day of the sun. And that he was crucified the day before Saturn's day. Now, I recognize, again, there's a ruckus over there with people with the 72 hours thing. I'm not going to get into that today, but I just want to show the testimony. This is showing the testimony of what day was Sabbath, what day was known as Sabbath in the second century. It was known as Saturn's Day. And the first day of the week was known as the day of the sun. All right? Not only that, Clement of Alexandria, also in that time, he says, he understands the meaning of the fourth day and of the preparation day, for they are called the one Mercury and the other Venus. Well, let's see. The fourth day, he goes Sunday, Moon Day, Mars Day, Mercury Day. The fourth day is Mercury. 5 is Thor's Day and Venus Day. And the preparation day is Venus. Frigga, Friday, Freya's Day. So here, the planetary week matched up as we know it today. And the fourth day, first he used biblical term fourth day and preparation day, and then he tied them with this Mercury and Venus. Augustine, in the 400s, he said, shall we observe the rest of the Sabbath and bind ourselves in the fetters of Saturn? This isn't him saying it. He's answering the Manichaean. The Manichaean says that. Augustine replies, we're not afraid to meet your scoff at the Sabbath when you call it the fetters of Saturn. It's a silly and unmeaning expression, which occurred to you only because you're in the habit of worshiping the sun on what you call Sunday. The Gentiles, of whom the apostle says that they worshiped and served the creature more than the creator, gave the names of their gods to the days of the week. Why do you try to bring in the name of Saturn in connection with the rest of the seventh day enjoined in Scripture merely because the Gentiles call the day Saturday? The Scripture name for the day is Sabbath, which means rest. Your scoff is as unreasonable as it is profane. So here, Sabbath was known as the day of Saturn still, and he says, we're not doing this because it's Saturn Day. We're not, just like the Jews didn't worship because it's Saturn's Day. It's the Sabbath, and it happens to fall with what the Gentiles call Saturn's Day. Time and time again. The continuity of the week. That one I'll just blow past. Talking on that one. Encyclopedia Britannica, 11th edition, article calendar says the week is a period of 7 days having no reference whatever to the celestial motions, a circumstance to which it owes its unalterable uniformity. It's not based on the moon. It has been employed from time immemorial in almost all Eastern countries and it forms neither an aliquot part of the year nor of the lunar month. You can't divide a week evenly into a year, so it's always going to begin on a Sunday the next year. You can't divide it into a month, so the next month's going to begin on the first of the week. It doesn't equal that out. So those who reject the Mosaic recital are going to be at a loss, as Delambre remarks, to assign it to an origin having such semblance of possibility. Why would anyone come up with this 7-day week when it doesn't match the heavens as far as how a month works or as far as how a year works? And why would nation after nation after nation after nation pick the same odd number of 7? And I don't mean just odd, but you know what I mean. Fine. One of the most striking collateral confirmations of the Mosaic history of the creation is the general adoption of the division of time in the weeks, which extends from the Christian states of Europe to the remote shores of Hindustan. It equally prevailed amongst the Hebrews, the Egyptians, the Chinese, the Greeks, the Romans, and northern barbarians, nations some of whom had little or no communication with others, who were not even known by name to the Hebrews, yet they have a 7-day week. And that's from Thomas Hartwell Horn, Introduction to the Critical Study and Knowledge of the Holy Scriptures, back in 1825. Our astronomical column out of Nature, back in 31, he says, some of these, the Jews and also many Christians, accept the week as a divine institution with which it is unlawful to tamper. Others, without these scruples, still feel it's useful to maintain a time unit that, unlike all others, has proceeded in an absolutely invariable manner since what we may be called the dawn of history. So the week has not been altered. Now, granted, there are some dickerings around with the divide line on the other side of the earth, the date line, where it's affected some countries like the Philippines at times or some others, but it doesn't mean we've lost time. In general, mankind has lost time. We still know what was done, and we know the cycle of 7 and how it continues, whether or not they jump the rope to the other side or whatever. We still know and have not lost sight of the count of 7 that's been going on from the beginning. The continuity of the week has crossed all centuries and all known calendars still intact. As in spite of 1582 and with the switch over from the Julian to the Gregorian, in the various other years, I'll go all through that in another message. I'm not taking the time today. I already have a lot here. We also see that the great race scattered throughout the world testifies to the fallacy of the lost time of history, that where we find the Jews when they were scattered, not just them, but even looking at Christianity, even as Christianity is the visible church switched over to Sunday, it still gives evidence of which day was Sabbath, because Sunday is the day after the Sabbath. We saw that testimony right from 2nd century from Justin Martyr. We saw it. And not only that, we also see within the scriptures, we know that the day, it says, we know that the first day of the week follows the Sabbath. You see it directly in the scriptures. It's there. So you can trace it even by people who are keeping Sunday. You can trace it by people keeping Sabbath. You can even trace it by people keeping Friday. Whichever which way, you know this is thing pop this way, that way. Now, B'nai Israel, the progenitors of the modern community, were exiled from the land of Israel hundreds of years before the Common Era. They shipwrecked off of the Palm de Bedek Konkan coast, south of what is today known as Bombay. Their community always remembered its Shema vow of loyalty to one God. They've guarded kosher laws, and they rest on Saturday. This is, again, hundreds of years. So this is even before Aristobulus saying the 7 days are the 7 planets. Hundreds of years before the Common Era, these people left, shipwrecked on an island, and when they're found, what day are they found keeping holy? The day we know as Saturday. How is that possible if they weren't keeping Saturdays beforehand? If they went by the moon, we should find somewhere some group of the Jews, wherever they've been scattered, going by the moon. You don't find any of them doing that. When they find them, they are keeping the Sabbath on Saturday. Jerzba, a small Tunisian Mediterranean island, has been a Shabbat oasis since the first Jews arrived here 2,600 years ago during the Babylonian exile. And they found them there, and what are they doing? They're keeping Saturday. A Shabbat oasis, 2,600 years ago. How long have they been keeping Shabbat on Saturday? Since before Saturday was even known as Saturday. Well, probably at that time it was, because the Babylonians were the ones who were doing the planetary weeks. The Jews of Bukhara, Uzbekistan, say their ancestors originally arrived here shortly after the destruction of the first temple in 586 BCE. And when they were found keeping Sabbath on Saturday. I mentioned earlier the Count of Pentecost and how that's an evidence. That was my second evidence that came to when I was thinking about lunar Sabbath. And it's also evidence regarding what was going on, because when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in every place, Jews, devout men out of every nation out of heaven, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, the dwellers in Mesopotamia and Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, parts of Libya round about Cyrene, strangers of Rome, the Cretes, the Arabians. If they're there keeping Pentecost the same day, it's only possible if they were keeping the same Sabbath. And the Sabbath they were keeping in Judea was the day of Saturn. That means all these people, wherever they were keeping the day of Saturn, wherever they were, to come and keep the morrow after the Sabbath in Acts chapter 2. Flavius Josephus, as I had alluded to earlier, said, nay, further, the multitude of mankind itself has had a great inclination of a long time to follow our religious observances. There is not any city of the Grecians, nor any barbarians, nor any nation whatsoever where our custom of resting on the seventh day has not come. Now, again, you go back and look in history and find what people were doing. People who are doing this, you don't find them keeping the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th day in Greece, any of the cities of Greece. You don't find this amongst the barbarians and what they're doing these things. They were keeping the Sabbath on Saturday. These things are seen as you look at the Sabbath amongst the nations, and you look at what's known as the seventh day, what we call Saturday here in America, and how it's seen amongst other nations. In ancient Syriac, a Shabbat. In Chaldean Syriac, Shabtu. Arabic, a Sabt, the Sabbath. Ancient Arabic, Shiar, the chief or rejoicing day. Samaritan, it's Shabbat. Amongst the Phoenicians in Africa, is known as Yini Sanbat, the Sabbath. The Maltese in Malta is Sibt, the Sabbath. Ethiopic and the Abyssinians, the Sanbat, the Sabbath. The Coptics, P. Sabbaton, the Sabbath. Sabbaton. Tamashek in the Atlas Mountains of Africa, it's Al Esapt, the Sabbath. In North Africa, Kabyle, it's the Sabbath day, Gas Asept. Central Africa, Asebatu, the Sabbath, and Hausa. Hindustani, the Mohammedans and the Hindus in India calls it Shamba, the Sabbath. Afghanistan and Pashto, they call it Shamba, the Sabbath. The Pahlavi of the ancient Persian call it Shambid, the president day of the week. Ancient Persian Shamba, Sabbath. Armenian, Shapat, Sabbath. Kurdish, Shamba, Sabbath. Burkuki, Baluchkistan, Shambe, Sabbath. Georgian and the Caucasus, Shabbati, Sabbath. The other Caucasus, Sanayan, is Samtim, Sabbath. Ingush in the Caucasus, Shat, Sabbath. Sumatra, Hari Sabtu, day of the Sabbath. Java, it's Sabto Sabtu, Sabbath. Borneo, it's Sabtu. Makasa or the Celebes or Salayer Islands at Satu. Madagascar, Al-Sabatsi, the Sabbath. In Swahili, Asap, the Sabbath. In Mandigo in West Africa, it's the Sabbath. In Teda, East Central Africa, Esebdu. In Bornu, Central Africa, Sibda, Sabbath. Kofude, Central Africa, Asebdu. Logon, Central Africa, say Sibde. Bagrima, Sibedi, the Sabbath. Central Africa, of Maba, it's called Sab, Sabbath. In Russian, Permian, it's Subota, Sabbath. Votiak, Russian, Sobota, Sabbath. Kazani, East Russia, Sobota, Sabbath. Osmanlian in Turkey, it's Yom Es Sabbat, or Sab, the day of the Sabbath. So you can see definitely Hebrew connection there, Yom. Orm of South Abyssinia, Zambada, Sabbath. In Congo, Sabato. Nothing, no Rungo. You're in the Congo. Wolof, it's Alire Asar, the last day Sabbath. In French, it's Desata, also Samedi. In Latin, Sabbatum. Italian, Sabato, Sabato. Spanish, Sabato. Portuguese, Sabado. Roman, Desapte. How many languages do we need to see it in? There's more and more and more that show that Saturday is the day known as Sabbath around the world. Now, coming close to a close here. I was talking with a couple of the brethren at the close of the feast on the last day for several hours, and we're talking many different doctrines. One of the things that came up was we're talking about the Sabbath and identifying it. How do we know that it's Saturn's day? And so there's no scripture that shows such a thing directly. And I said, actually, it does, because there's some here in the New Testament. I've alluded to it before somewhat by the words of Justin Martyr, but also in the New Testament we have these examples here. In Matthew 27:62, now the next day, that one that follows the day of preparation, and that preparation day is Periskeve, and we're going to find as we're going through this. The chief priests and Pharisees came together to Pilate. Mark 15:42, now when even was come, because it was the Periskeve, that is the pro-Sabbaton. So Mark twice stamps it. It's Periskeve and pro-Sabbaton. Luke 23:54, that day was the Periskeve, and the Sabbaton was coming. John 19:31, the Jews therefore, because it was the Periskeve, the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high. Besought Pilate the leg may be broken. Mark 15:42, when we say here that it was the twice marked thing, it was the preparation that is the day before the Sabbath, pro-Sabbaton. I'm going to cite a couple of examples here out of non-biblical works. The Catholics claim this stuff is the Bible. I'm not citing it because it's an authority. I'm citing it because it shows the word usage and how they understood pro-Sabbaton and what it means. Okay, so this is for word study or word usage, not because Judith has any say-so over how we live, or Maccabee. Okay, so in Judith 8:6, she fasted in an entire period except the day before the Sabbath, pro-Sabbaton, and the Sabbath itself, and the eve of the new moon festival, and the festival itself, and all the festivals and holidays observed by the people of Israel. Now, what's important here with Judith is that we see that pro-Sabbaton is the day before the Sabbath, but it's not the day before a festival. There's a new moon festival and the festival itself, or the eve, but that's not called a pro-Sabbaton, because the moon festival isn't a Sabbaton, it's a Shabbaton of the Hebrew, or it's an Apostos in the Greek. Right? So it's not called a pro-Sabbaton, it's not called a Periskeve. 2 Maccabees 8:26, it was the day before the Sabbath, pro-Sabbaton. For that reason, they did not continue the pursuit. When they collected the arms of the enemy, stripped them of their spoils, they kept the Sabbath. So we see it was the day before the Sabbath. And I show that both by the Greek and by the context. So we understand what pro-Sabbaton means. It means it's the day before the Sabbath. Now, here's what I want to come back and show now. When Mark 15:42, when the evening was come, because it was the Periskeve, which is the day before the Sabbath, which is pro-Sabbaton. So we've identified without a doubt that Sabbaton is the Sabbath. Pro-Sabbaton, without a doubt, is the day before the weekly Sabbath, because that's its usage. That's its usage both within Scripture and within even the extra books. Now, Periskeve is a technical designation for Friday, according to Moulton and Milligan in the Vocabulary of Greek New Testament. Also stated by Leon Morris, he says the fact must be faced that no example of the use of Periskeve is cited for any day other than Friday. Okay. Josephus recorded regarding Caesar Augustus. Because remember, Rome allowed Israel to worship to the dictates of their conscience according to the scriptures. They are allowed to worship and keep their faith. Caesar Augustus, high priest and tribune of the people, ordains this, since the nation of the Jews has been found grateful to the Roman people, not only this time, but in time past also, chiefly Hyrcanus, high priest, under my father Caesar the emperor, it seemed good to me and my counselors, according to the sentence and oath of the people of Rome, that the Jews have the liberty to make use of their own customs according to the law of their forefathers, as they made use of them under Hyrcanus, the high priest of the Almighty God, that their sacred money be not touched, but be sent to Jerusalem, and that it may be committed to the care of the receivers at Jerusalem, and they be not obliged to go before any judge on the Sabbath day, nor on the day of preparation to it after the 9th hour. Josephus recorded this, and that there is talking about the Periskeve. The Periskeve is the day before the Sabbath. It's the preparation day. Periskeve is literally preparation. It's the day you prepare things, just like we learn in Exodus 16, verse 5, and Exodus 16, verse 23. That's the day to prepare things for the Sabbath. So what is actually Periskeve is the day before the Sabbath. And guess what? Here's a screenshot. And you can do this yourself. Go on Google, type in the word Friday in Greek, and I'll tell you, it's Periskeve. Periskeve, to this day, is the word for Friday. So when people want to say, oh, you can't determine from the scriptures what day of the week is Sabbath, they don't understand that actually you can. The scriptures use the Greek word for Friday and say that's the day before Sabbath. In other words, Sabbath is Saturday. Sunset to sunset, not midnight to midnight. Not only that, they're the Greek days, Deutera the second, Trite the third, Harte the fourth, Pempte the fifth, Periskeve, which is preparation, and then Sabbaton, Sabbath, because they call Saturday Sabbaton. So Periskeve means Friday, Sabbaton is Saturday in Greek. But not only that, it's not only in our Greek New Testament, which the Holy Spirit authored the New Testament in Greek, but it's also in the Aramaic translation. In Aramaic, the middle days of the week are designated by numbers 3rd, 4th, 5th, but Friday is always Arukta. There is no 6th day of the week. Its Greek equivalent, Periskeve, Friday, was also likewise adopted by the Greek Church. So when you're reading, for instance, if you're reading the Peshitta text, and it talks about preparation day, you'll even see in Lambs's translation of the text, of George Lambs's translation of the Aramaic Bible, he straight up translates it as Friday, because that's what the Aramaic word Arukta means. It means Friday. So that's actually evidence that Saturn's day is the Sabbath. So what we're having is, just as I said from the get-go, we see the true Sabbath is the 7th day of the week. It is not any day you choose. It's the seventh, and it's each week is being contiguous to the next. There's nothing coming between it. No new moon day or days. None of that stuff's happening. It's independent of the moon that was just created 3 days before its occurrence. 4 days, counting inclusive. It is a 24-hour period from sunset to sunset. It is the true Sabbath. It's the very day that Yeshua, that Jesus kept, and it's the same day kept by the Jews wherever they live. And we found that even as they spread out and went, here's what it was. We find it's marked by Scripture, it's marked by history, it's marked by living people as they're spread across the place. It's marked not just by the Jews, it's marked by the Christians, both the Sabbath keepers and the Sunday keepers, because both show the mark. Because either one's keeping the seventh or one's keeping the first, or showing the order of the week. All right. So if the Sabbath being presented to you does not bear each and every one of these characteristics, it is not the true Sabbath of Scripture. But this is the Sabbath. This is how you know it. It's from sunset to sunset. Friday at sunset to Saturday at sunset. It is the seventh day of the week. It is the day kept by Messiah. It's the day kept by his people. That's it.